Hello and welcome to episode 17, I think this is now, of what I've decided to call the Healthy Middle Ground podcast with Jen Curtis. Because that's always kind of been my shtick, is talking about the healthy middle ground with things, just being like rational and level-headed and evidence-based and all of that stuff, and just kind of like letting common sense guide you. And I find that has been always a very good approach with nutrition and training. And obviously, the Healthy Middle Ground podcast, the healthy comes into all of that health and, all of that kind of stuff. But I do want to talk about other topics as well on this podcast. Things pertaining to motherhood, life, potentially politics, current affairs, things like that. If I get around to it. But I do mainly want to focus on health and nutrition and training, of course. But I'm currently 34 weeks pregnant. So my mind is very much moving towards pregnancy and babies and all of that kind of stuff. So I decided today that I want to talk about a topic that I did talk about quite a bit after my second, and I threatened to make a blog post, and I had quite a lot of requests for it and quite a lot of interest in it, but never got around to actually writing it. So I thought I would just shoot a podcast episode and just get my ideas down for you guys on combo feeding. So hopefully this is just going to be a short episode on combo feeding and a kind of a little bit of a guide for how to do it. So let's give this a go. Okay, so combo feeding, and by that what I mean is breastfeeding, but also supplementing with formula, which I think is the best way to feed a baby. My personal preference is like predominantly breastfeeding and then a little bit of topping up with formula. This is obviously a topic that is like radioactive amongst mothers. Some people are so against using formula that it's just absolutely crazy. And I find that, again, everyone falls into one of two categories, and this false dichotomy is created, either where you exclusively breastfeed or you just bottle feed, you just give formula. And often it's set up as a false dichotomy and you have to kind of pick one camp. But I think the reality on the ground is that most women sort of struggle with exclusive breastfeeding. Most women want to breastfeed, and we have this kind of, certainly what I experienced, even as somebody who doesn't sort of see herself as particularly maternal, is that there's this real drive to breastfeed and this real desire to breastfeed and to not give formula. But that breastfeeding, like a lot of things in nature, like really sucks. Like parts of it really suck. Some of it is really, really great. But when you just try and do exclusive breastfeeding, what I found is that you end up with a hungry baby, especially in the beginning, until your milk comes in, and you end up with really, really sore nipples, and it's just awful, and it's so painful, and it's so unpleasant, and it's just like a round the clock thing until your milk supply comes in, and it just sucks so much. You don't sleep, you just have this baby stuck to you, and like it's just a really, really, really horrible experience. This is what happened to me with my first, and I had a breastfeeding consultant at the time, a private breastfeeding consultant who I thought would be really great, but she put the fear of God in me about giving any formula whatsoever. And so for a week, and I know it was only a week of my life, but it felt like 10 years. It was the longest week of my life, where I had just had like this emergency C-section. I was in a terrible state. I had the most traumatic labor that didn't progress. I was in so much pain. I hadn't slept for days. I was so stressed, probably really, really, really dehydrated and undernourished. And then I had this woman telling me, like, you can't give your baby any formula. It will confuse them. They'll get nipple confusion. Like, you have to just do it, like, just breastfeeding. And I just had a baby that was stuck to my boobs 24/7. And already, like, just when you have your first baby, it's like the most overwhelming thing in the world. Like, you've gone from being just a person, just you, and now you have this baby that you're completely responsible for, and it's terrifying. And when they're just completely stuck to you all day, 24 hours a day, like, and you don't sleep and you don't get any breaks from it, and you don't have enough time to like brush your teeth or have a shower, it is just the most awful experience. Something that can be so beautiful is really, really ruined. And the unfortunate thing about it is obviously, I think you'd have to be, as somebody who did bottle feed their children and combo fed their children, I don't find it hard to admit that obviously breastfeeding is preferable. Obviously, like, that's what we want to do. But like I said before, like so many things in nature, it is just a really fucked system that often doesn't work. Now, some women, they have tons and tons and tons of milk and it's amazing, and they've got too much milk and it just flows out. But a lot of women really struggle with supply. And I think there is a better solution, and we don't have to go either full blown, okay, no breastfeeding, just bottle feeding, or exclusive breastfeeding. I think, like most things, there is a healthy middle ground. And I also think that while, like, fine, breastfeeding is best, and that's definitely what I want to do with my children, it's definitely the more nutritional option. It's the more natural option. Whatever, they get all these great things through the breast milk is amazing. But the difference between 100% breastfed and 80% breastfed really is, like, not a big deal. Just like most things, I advocate for flexible dieting within nutrition. Just like that. 80% breastfed, whatever, 70, 90, you get all the benefits of breastfeeding. But then if you do the other 10 to 30% bottle feeding, like, you're still going to get all the benefits without any of the drawbacks of breastfeeding. And for some women, even that might not be a reality. You might not have enough milk. Some women just don't have a supply. Just like everything else in nature, sometimes it goes wrong. It's no one's fault. It just isn't 100% perfect. And you may find yourself doing 50-50 or like just 30% breastfeeding, and that's okay too. But I just want to, what I want to do in this podcast is tell you how to do combo feeding the way I think is the best way of doing combo feeding, like the most effective way, just in a really pragmatic sense, like no ideology here, just in a pragmatic of like what works best kind of way, so that you can get the best of both worlds and just have a nicer experience. Okay, so here's what I decided to do with my second, and it just worked incredibly well. So despite all the advice I got, what I decided to do is from the birth, I decided to give him like as much, each feed to give him as much breast milk as I had, and then top up with formula on every single feed. So what happened is that, I gave him, say, 5 minutes on each boob. I'm talking about, I've just had a C-section. Like a couple of hours later, he's been brought to me for his first feed. I've got, I don't actually have any milk yet. I don't have any colostrum coming through. I had a woman come to me in the recovery room who tried to like squeeze the crap out of my boobs. And I was like, no, go away. And I got given my baby the first time after the birth. I gave him 5 minutes on each boob. Barely anything came out because there's nothing to come out yet. But you need and then straight away afterwards, I gave him a bottle of formula, and just as much as he wanted. And he was huge. And on that first feed, he drank something like 60 milliliters, even though the recommendation was for him to only drink like 20 or something. But he was clearly starving. He drank the whole thing, and then he just pooed and went to sleep for like 2 hours. 2 hours later, I then gave him again, like however much time on each boob that I felt was like, it was a little bit sort of like intuitive, whatever, but it felt like, you know, I after that first feed, you know, I had a little bit of milk, like started to feel my boobs filling up just a little bit. So then, you know, he's drinking a little bit of colostrum from each side, like let's say 5 minutes each side again. This time he drank a little bit more because my boobs are producing a little bit more. And then I just topped up with formula just as much as he wanted. And again, like just like pooed, went to sleep, 2-3 hours later, just did the whole thing again. And what this does is it gives you like every 2 to 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever, you're getting a few minutes of stimulation on each boob that then tells your boob that you need to like make more milk. So each feed, you get more and more and more milk coming through. And I really felt this happening. Like every single feed, I felt that, you know, you feel the milk coming through, and I felt him eating more. And the amount of milk that the amount of formula that he ate then afterwards in the top up then started to reduce. And then I would see it go down to like, instead of going up when he's getting bigger, it went down to like 50, 40, 30, until eventually he was only having, you know, after a couple of days, he was only sort of having 10 milliliters or 20 milliliters and like really not having very much formula at all. And I think it took about, you know, my boobs then you started to fill up properly with milk, and it goes from being colostrum to like actually, you know, having like milk coming out. And after like a week or two, I was literally at the point where most feeds during the day, I just didn't need to top anything up. There was plenty of milk. I could even pump a little bit afterwards and save some. There was plenty milk, but I still kept like 1 feed or 2 feeds a day with formula, and I'll explain why later. So literally after a week or two, like I'm at the point where it could be exclusive breastfeeding, but I decided to keep it at 80% and like not 100% exclusive breastfeeding. Again, I'll talk about that later. And you might say, well, why bother doing this? Why have those first, like that first week or two where you're topping up with formula? And the reason is that if you don't top up with formula, well, let's talk about what happens when you do top up with formula. When you give them what they need or what you have from your boob, and then you top up with formula, they then get a full belly, they get a full feed right from the beginning. And then they go to sleep and they give you some time, like between 2-3 hours to then like do other things, right? Like we have other things to do other than just be, yes, it's amazing being with your baby, but if any of you have ever been like, there's too much of it, such a thing as too much of a good thing. If you only ate chocolate all day, it would suck, right? And when you're with a newborn and they're with you and they're on you 24 hours a day, it sucks. It really, really sucks. So you get this baby that then goes to sleep, and right from the beginning, you're training them to go into these like regular sleep patterns and sleep to eat every 3 hours or so, and then sleep in between each of those feeds. And it really sets them up for that. Whereas if you don't top up with formula, what you end up with is the first week you have a baby that is attached to you 24/7. They're hungry because they're not getting enough milk off of you, and your boobs get horribly, horribly, horribly sore, and you get this horrible overwhelm from just having a baby on you all the time. And by topping up at every single feed, you completely circumvent all of that. Now, I've had some people say, like, mostly I've had just like really positive feedback from friends, from followers about doing this, and they've tried it themselves and it's worked really, really well. And I actually had a couple of lactation consultants reach out to me as well and say, like that's like, I've never thought of doing it that way. That's really cool. Like, I'm going to introduce that to my clients. So that was really positive as well. But obviously you do get some pushback, and some people are like, the most common bit of pushback I get is like, oh, that seems like a lot of work, because then you have to do the breastfeeding and you have to do the bottle feeding and you have to clean all the bottles all the time. And to that, I say, like, have you ever tried breastfeeding a baby 24 hours a day for 2 weeks? Like, it just, like, it sucks. It's so much work. This is way, 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 way less work than that. Like, all you have to do is just, like, once the baby goes to sleep, just wash and sterilize that bottle, and, like, hey presto, you're done. And it's only for the first, like, 2 weeks as well. It's only a few minutes work every feed, and it's only for the first couple of weeks. And then you get to the point where your feeds are long enough and you've got enough milk to give to the baby for, like, to fill them up and for them to go to sleep. So you're not having to top up like 10 milliliters every single feed after that. Some women might find that they have to because they're not producing enough milk. But then if you're not producing enough milk, you end up with a baby that doesn't sleep and is hungry. And that is way, 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 way more work than just topping up whatever the baby needs. So this works whether you need to continue topping up, for the rest of your breastfeeding journey, or if you get to the point like I did, where then you have enough milk at every single feed. And when I did this with my second, I had no sore boobs. I didn't use any of that, like, cream, that nipple cream. I didn't get cracked nipples. I didn't get bleeding nipples. I didn't get mastitis. I didn't get anything. When my first, I got everything. And breastfeeding was so painful for like a month, and it was just, I dreaded that latching on every single time, and it's just none of that with the second. So again, this is just a really, really, really pragmatic way of looking at it. Zero ideology. Like, obviously there are going to be some women who will lose their minds and go, oh my god, no, like, formula is poison and, like, all this crap. But like, the vast majority of people are sane and don't actually believe that, and will realize that what I'm saying here is just, like, it's just a sensible middle ground kind of approach to it. So really, really simple, just, like, from the first feed, like, a few minutes on each side, and then top up as much as the baby needs with formula, and then just do that every single feed. Whenever the baby wakes up, whenever the baby's ready to eat, just do the exact same thing every single feed until you get to, and what you will probably find is that each feed, the amount of milk that you produce and the time the baby spends on each breast will increase, and the amount of formula that they're drinking will decrease with every single feed. So that's basically how to do it. Then you get to a certain point, most women will get to a certain point, say 2 weeks in, where then you're pretty much at exclusive breastfeeding, or it's like, 70% and up, unless you have a real supply problem, in which case you're going to need to keep combo feeding no matter what, because there's no choice. You don't have enough milk, right? So at that point, if you do have enough milk to just move to exclusive breastfeeding, you have a few choices, right? Obviously, you can just switch to exclusive breastfeeding, and that's totally fine. What I did, and what I think is the best way of going about it, is to keep it at like 80-20. Why? A few things. I've heard so many stories from working with mums for like a decade, and having lots of friends who've had babies and whatever, having done it myself, I've heard so many stories of women who have exclusively breastfed for 4, 6, 9 months, whatever, and then they want to put their child in a creche, in a nursery, whatever, with a childminder, and the baby won't take a bottle. And then they're stuck, right? They can't get the baby to take a bottle, not even a bottle of breast milk. So what I personally chose to do was to continue giving a tactical bottle once a day for the time that I breastfed for, which wasn't particularly long. I'll admit, I didn't find it very easy to keep going. I just didn't enjoy it enough after a certain point. But whatever, that's a different topic. But what I decided to, it wasn't because my supply was going down or anything like that. That's a really important point to make. It was a choice an active choice and a personal choice to stop, for a lot of reasons, including mental health. But anyway, again, that's another story. So what I did is I kept at least one tactical bottle a day. So this meant this was usually like the last feed of the day, at night time, at midnight. We decided to do it like the first feed, first like wake up in the night. And the main reason, the reason to keep a bottle at all of formula, even when you can exclusively breastfeed, is to keep the baby used to drinking a bottle and drinking formula at least once a day, so that whenever you decide to put them in childcare, you can, because they won't refuse a bottle, right? And I would recommend keeping that as formula and not giving pumped breast milk, precisely for the reason that you want them to be able to take formula when you want to stop giving them formula. I'm sure a lot of women will disagree with that, but I think that's a sensible approach. The other reason why I chose to do that was so that my husband could feed the baby and have some time to be with the baby himself, and some bonding time. That's even if it's just one feed a day, it's some really quality time that they have together, that they can do skin to skin, that he can look into the baby's eyes, that the baby feels their father and hears their voice and all of that kind of stuff. So I wanted to keep it so that someone else could feed, or also that anyone else could feed the baby. I wanted my baby from day one to feel really comfortable, not just with me. Obviously, as the mother, I'm going to be with my baby more than anyone else, but that they would feel comfortable in the arms of other people. We have a really big family that's really involved in the child rearing. So I really wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to hold the baby and bond with the baby. For that reason, it actually ended up being more like 2 feeds a day, because there was always a feed in the afternoon sometime when someone else was around, and it meant that I could skip that feed, and I had those 20-30 minutes to do something else while someone else really, really enjoyed being with the baby. The other reason was, and the reason why that particular feed we chose to do at midnight, was because that meant that, so if the baby was waking up 2 or 3 times a night, that I was only getting up once or twice. So what was pretty much happening, what happened with my second, is that, he'd go down at say 8-9 o'clock, something like that. He'd wake up for his first feed at like 11-12 o'clock, and then again at like 4 o'clock in the morning. So for me, 4-5 o'clock in the morning, something like that. So for me, I would go to bed as soon as my baby went to bed, and then my husband would get up for the first feed at around midnight, and I would keep on sleeping. And then when I got woken up at 4-5 o'clock, sometimes I would go back to bed, but sometimes if it was at 5, then, that was enough for me. And sometimes there was another feed in between as well. There was 3 o'clock and then 6 o'clock, something like that. And that sucked more. But again, waking up twice was better than waking up 3 times. And I did get every night I got that really good 6-hour stretch, at least a 6-hour stretch, which made me feel a lot better than if I had to get up at the 12 o'clock feed as well. So it was just a way of dividing up that work so that it wasn't just me getting up. You can, of course, have pumped milk for that feed, but I would also find that I found pumping awful. I was just it's just too much to do. I just hated it. So I didn't want to pump. And for other reasons that I mentioned before, I thought it was better to have formula so that the baby would stay used to it. So that kind of loosely became our routine after the first sort of 2 weeks or so, where we were having sort of regular feeds every 3-4 hours, and yes, waking up in the night, but being able to share those feeds was definitely better than not sharing them and me doing it all myself. And obviously with a baby, it changes from day to day, especially in those first few months. But that was loosely our routine. And then when it got to the point when I wanted to put my child in childcare, I just dropped more feeds and continued with the breastfeeding when they were at home. So it dropped to like 50-50, and then eventually dropped breastfeeding altogether, which, I decided to do all of that quite early on. But that's just a personal choice. You could keep doing that for a year or whatever, 2 years if you wanted to, and it would still work. So I definitely recommend, if you get to the point where, exclusive breastfeeding is on the cards, I do recommend keeping that one tactical bottle a day so that you can transition to childcare and so that other people can feed the baby as well and bond with the baby. It's not just about taking some of the burden off of you, but it's also about, other people being able to bond with the baby, which I think is a really positive experience for the baby as well. But it also ensures that you don't get stuck in a situation where the baby will refuse a bottle and then you're in this hellish situation where, you leave them with a childminder for a few hours and you come home and the childminder's pulling her hair out because the baby won't eat and has just cried for the past 2 hours. Anyone who's been with a crying baby that's, just crying solidly for 2 hours knows that this is like crazy making really fast. So we really need to make sure that mums are not in that situation where, it's not just 2 hours of the baby being hungry and crying. It can be days and days and days on end, and it can literally make you feel like you're going insane. So that's it. Those are my tips for really effective and pragmatic combo feeding. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you'll try it and let me know how you found it. I want to leave you with a couple of things that I think are really important. First of all, with my first, I really, like that first week, I really took it to heart what I was being told about nipple confusion and how the baby then won't want to breastfeed, and it's really important to exclusively breastfeed right from day one, and that formula is poison and all this stuff. And I have never in my life felt so unhinged. That first week, a week with a crying, hungry baby is just so long and so hellish, and it feels like a year. And I was just absolutely going mad. I was in tears all the time. I was like, what have I done? I've completely ruined my life and my husband's life, and I'm going to ruin this baby's life. And it was the most horrible experience of my life, I think, rather than being really like, a joyous time. And I had a really close friend at the time who, I phoned her up, and she was like telling me that, she did the same, but for 6 months, and she thought she was going to go nuts, and she listened to all the advice. And she told me nothing in breast milk is more important than your mental health. And after she told me that, it took me another day to implement it, but it made me decide to chill out and to let other people feed the baby and to give the baby formula. And me and my husband both got sleep for the first time in over a week. And from that point, I really started to enjoy my postpartum experience. And everything settled down then. And I just really started to be able to lean into it and enjoy my time with my baby. And I stopped freaking out, and I stopped feeling like I was going absolutely crazy. And finally, I know, again, this is one of those topics, breastfeeding is one of those topics that is absolutely radioactive when you're just in that, cesspit of like postpartum, new mums, especially if it's your first baby. This is my third now, so I'm kind of a bit more immune to all the crap that's out there. But it can be so scary, especially when it's your first. And there are some people who are very ideological about breastfeeding and about birth and about all the rest of it. But it is my belief that mums really need support in knowing that there are different options for feeding their baby. that suit, you know, how they operate as humans, that suit their personalities, that suit their family dynamics, and that suit their values, and that it doesn't have to be all or nothing, and that there is a healthy middle ground, and there is a way of kind of doing combo feeding that doesn't mean that you have to go all the way one way or all the way the other. And I'm just presenting this again. I obviously think this is the best way of doing it. This is how I'm going to do it with the baby that I'm having in a few weeks. I obviously think this is the best way of doing it, but like, it's just an option. Okay, it's just an option that's on the table, and mums should know, women should know that they do have this option as well available to them, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. They don't have to subscribe to someone else's ideology. So with that, that's the end of the podcast. Let me know your thoughts.